Hey, everybody. Thanks for beginning your weekend with Bookish, the virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life, which is brought to you by the Southern California News Group and the Bay Area News Group. I'm Sam Dunn. I'm the senior editor of premium content here at SCNG and a book nerd and an author myself. I just want to say thank you to our Reader Rewards subscribers and to all of you who've made our virtual program so popular. By the way, if you are a Reader Rewards member attending tonight, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift card from Barnes & Noble. Also, you can get signed copies of books by today's authors from our new partner and one of our favorite independent bookstores in Los Angeles County, Once Upon a Time. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our Bookish hostess with the mostest. She is a writer, performer, and radio commentator, and you might know her work from NPR's Morning Edition and This American Life. She's also a contributing editor to The Atlantic and host of the syndicated Radio Minute, the lowdown on science. The author of many books, her most recent one is The Mad Woman and the Roomba. Beaming to us from bohemian splendor in Pasadena, please welcome my dear friend, Sandra Singlo. Sandra, are you there? Hello.
I'm here. Do you like my mysterious aura that has come out? We've done 100 of these, it seems, and we've never had this weird lighting, and I think there's going to be some spirit things that are happening today.
Ooh, it is the spooky month after all, so you never know.
And can I ask you quickly, well, before we go to the show, is your son going to be trick-or-treating this year?
He is, in fact, although it's a little bit different than it was in previous years because now he's a middle schooler and it's a little bit, he's a little bit too cool and too big for all of that. So there's a pack of middle schoolers who are going to get together for a house party and then just go around the block scaring people. So that's trick or treat now.
That's nice. Nice boy. Nice boy. Okay.
Well, you remember those days.
It is the spooky month of October. So today, originally in my mind, the theme for this was going to be, wait for it, Twisted Sisters and a Twisted Brother.
Oh, okay. Do tell.
Okay, so hear me out. So J.J. French, guitarist, founder of Twisted Sister, who is now written about business. Yay. Mary Roach, everyone's favorite comedic science writer, who, amongst other things, her legendary TED Talk, almost 20 billion views, was called 10 Things You Didn't Know About Orgasm. And watching it will make you never want to participate in that activity ever again in a hilarious way, but you'll die laughing. So that's kind of twisted. Okay, a Twisted Sister. And then, of course, Alice Hoffman, who is the legendary author of the amazing series, the Practical Magic series, which is about witches. So that's also twisted. And then, of course, John Lithgow, the delightful actor everyone knows, whose satiric verse is delightfully twisted. Wait till you see what he rhymes with Bernie Madoff, okay? So, but as in true rock and roll form, J.J. French is right now at this very minute at a rock concert in the East Coast with bad Wi-Fi backstage.
Of course he is, Sandra. Of course he is. How many times have we been stood up by musicians? I just, come on.
Well, you and I have ex-husbands that are musicians, not the same guy, and that would be for Bookish after the show.
Yes,
another series. But in any case, it's a big relief, time-wise anyway, because we have so much to get through regardless. So
yes, we do. I'll let you get to it. Okay, I'm out.
So first up, and we're rejiggering the order a little bit, and we'll see what happens. We're gonna go to Alice Hoffman, the great Alice Hoffman, and here is the 30-second download. For those who don't know, Alice Hoffman is the author of more than 30 works of fiction, published in more than 20 translations and 100 foreign editions. Her books include Magic Lessons, the prequel to Practical Magic, The World That We Knew, The Rules of Magic, The Marriage of Opposites, Practical Magic, The Red Garden, and The Museum of Extraordinary Things. Her Oprah's Book Club selection, Here on Earth, is a modern reworking of themes from Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Toni Morrison calls her book, The Dove Keepers, the story of the survivors of Masada, a major contribution to 21st century literature. Hoffman's short fiction and nonfiction have appeared in the New York Times, Kenyon Review, Harvard Review, Plowshares, and other magazines. Her newest book, The Book of Magic, the fourth and mesmerizing final novel in the Practical Magic series, is just out this very month. Welcome, Alice.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being on Bookish. Okay, so first question before we go directly to the book. Okay, so by any measure, Alice, you're
Yeah.
a writer who is so hugely popular and commercially successful. I mean, for one thing, I've just recently rewatched Practical Magic, the hit movie made by Warner Brothers, starring Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. Doesn't get more A-list than that. And of course, not to mention Diane Wiest and Stockard Channing, hashtag Dreamcast. Okay, but of course, your writing and interests are also really highly literary as well. So, and I think people try to categorize sometimes your Practical Magic series. Is it romance? Is it historical fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it all three? Do you think of your books in any one genre? Or here are my genre books, literature? How do you think about writing in these many modes, if you will?
Well, I don't think in terms of genre. I think that's kind of a false construct. And I think, I remember when I was growing up, there was always like, there were fantasy and science fiction writers, and they weren't like real writers, they weren't literary writers. I think that has really changed. And I think, kind of genreization, keeps people away from certain books that they might really love, but they're kind of get scared off by thinking, oh, it's a mystery, or oh, it's science fiction, it's fantasy. And I just have never believed in that. It's never made a difference to me as a reader. I mean, what is Wuthering Heights? It's a ghost story. It's a romance. It's a mystery. It's a psychological novel. It's everything.
Yeah, and I think also you're thinking of Wuthering Heights, and that you've also said, Heathcliff, like your impression of him changes year after year, of like when you read as a young person and then middle. I mean, have you found that?
Oh yeah, when you read as I think when you read as a young person, you think he's the great romantic hero, and then you read when you're a little bit older and you think he's a psychopath, and then you read when you're even older and you think he's just a very complicated person. And I always feel like Wuthering Heights is the book I would take with me to a desert island, because you can reread it, and it's different every time you read it, which is one of the great things about it.
So, okay, so going to to the Book of Magic, if you will. So this story, and I think what's interesting, it begins in a library. And I think there's a connection that you've always made between, witches and libraries, women writing, women telling stories, et cetera, et cetera. And so can you talk a little bit? I mean, it begins in a library where Kylie's mother says, when you're in trouble, go to the library. Can you say what the connection for you with libraries is?
Well, for me, I have always felt like words are magic and books are magic. And I personally feel that, libraries saved my life. At both my school library when I was in grammar school, where I had the best librarian, Mrs. Inkin, who let me take out as many books as I wanted to take out, and to the public library in the next town that let me also have a library card without being a resident. I just feel that it changed my life in such a deep way that I knew there was an outside world. I knew there were other possibilities. And so the Book of Magic, which is kind of the fourth in my series and closure, for both the characters and for me, it's really kind of an ode to libraries, but and also to the books that I love, and the books that I feel like what you read when you're 12 and 13 and 14, that's the books that really form who you are as a person. So, but they're just, it's an ode to the books that I've loved through different periods in my life.
Yeah, and I also love something that you've said, that literature itself is, have you said like folk tales and fairy tales, and that almost told by grandmothers around a fire. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's completely right. I feel like that's how literature began, is, those stories that our grandmothers told us. And then they were written down, so I feel like, my first reading was fairy tales, myths, magic, but really, were the stories that my grandmother told me when we were on the bus in New York City and she was telling me about her life growing up in Russia. That for me was the beginning of literature.
And I think what's interesting is that your Practical Magic series has only gained in popularity over the years, which is really interesting.
I think one of the reasons for that is that there's a different feeling about sisterhood and about books about women, and books where women are the main characters instead of the sidekicks, the girlfriend, the mother, whoever, that they are the most important characters. And I always think that when I was a girl in school, we did not read anything written by women. I mean, we read no diverse literature, but we read nothing written by women. The first thing I read in school written by a young woman was the Diary of Anne Frank. And that really changed everything for me, because it was just hearing this other voice and making me feel like, I might also have something to say, even though I was just a girl.
Yeah, and I think that there's so many great characters between sister and sister, aunt and aunt, mother and daughter. And it's funny because you have occasionally handsome young men who die, and that's sad as we go. But I want to say, like, person with
visions.
Well, they have to die
sometimes.
But what I love also, and for readers who are new to your work, to go back to what I appreciate. I'm turning 60 next year, which my kids inform me is not middle-aged. It's beyond middle age. I love that you have so many characters. I mean, you have Agnes Durant, who's well over 100 in this book. Characters of all these different ages come up, and the older women they still eat the chocolate tipsy cake that has a bit of rum in it. They wear their red boots. It's really fun to see all these different characters of different ages running around. And
thank you for saying that, because I've been writing this for so long, for over 25 years, so I feel like I've grown old with them, and it's been kind of a pleasure in my life to do that. And yeah, that they're still alive, and that they still have a lot of life left in them.
Yeah, and then they can flash from being girls to adults and back, sort of when you're thinking about Heathcliff. Kind of in different generations, things can change. You can look at stories differently, etc. So now I think to a little bit of this book, of the Owens family curse, which is likely the most famous family curse in modern literature. Could you explain to readers new to it what the Owens family curse is, if you might?
Yeah, well, in the origin story, which is a book called Magic Lessons, but also in Practical Magic, there's the initial Owens woman named Maria Owens. It makes a terrible mistake in love. She falls in love with somebody horrible, John Hawthorne, who was a judge at the Salem witch trials. Big mistake. And she, to save the women in her family to come, she puts a curse on them that says that if they fall in love, that person they fall in love with will meet with a horrible end, will probably die, and usually does die. But the thing is, she feels that she's protecting them, but really she's cursing them. And it made me think of, so many families where kind of a curse is handed down, or like a legacy is handed down. Sometimes you don't even know why, or for what reasons, why your grandmother, said these things to you that made you so paranoid about certain things. And, you just don't know, because you don't know your relatives who are older, how they were when they were young. And so I think the Owens curse, is a very literal curse, but I think it's something we all kind of have in our families.
Yeah, and when we may be defined by it, also when it lifts, something else may happen.
Yes. Yes, which is what the Book of Magic is all about, trying to break that curse.
So, okay, to your writing process for a moment, you have such a big legion of fans, and of course, writers are always interested, or aspiring writers or readers, on how writers write. So can you tell us what your writing day might be like, and where you write? Do you write at that neat little desk that's right there next to you? No. Can you show the real Alice Hoffman, like, okay, where do you write? What does that look like? Can you tell us?
It's kind of changed for me as years have gone on, because when I started out, I was in school and I was working. So I would get up at 5 o'clock and I would write for 2 hours before I went to work or school. And then I knew I at least had those 2 hours. I'm still kind of do that. I like to get up like at 5:30 and write in the morning. For me, that's the best time, when like nobody's bothering me or coming to the door, or, so I find that the more you write, the easier it is. So I feel that I try to write every day. It's actually hard for me to stop at this point. I feel I write the way I read. The way I was a reader, which was an obsessive reader. I always had a book with me. I'm that way as a writer too. I'm always in a story. And, as a kid and as a young reader, I read to escape. And I do that as a writer too. I mean, for me, it's a big escape. It's a lot of work, but it's also a big escape. I always think, for people starting out who want to write, I think to do it every day, so not facing that blank screen or that blank page, so that you have something that you're working on, makes it a lot easier.
Alice, where do you write?
I often write in bed. Terrible for your posture and for your back and your spine, but that I often write in bed, or I write on the couch with my dog. I never write at a desk anymore, and I feel so lucky to be portable and to be able to write anywhere.
And it's been asked, so I'm the stalking fan. And so, what's your favorite snack while you are writing?
That's an interesting question, but I don't really eat while I'm writing because it just seems like too messy. I only drink tea or water. I just snack all the rest of the time, but not when I'm writing.
So, okay. So you've talked about your writing process. I'm picturing you in bed with your tea, your courage tea, or any kind of tea, your courage to write
Absolutely.
tea.
Yep.
But you've said in your process, you've described the writing process, not just that you sort of, to get to the end, you have to go back to the beginning. You've talked about your writing being a journey of discovery. I think in one interview, when you've been talking about magic lessons, your heroine meets someone in St. Thomas, and you said, it was a complete surprise to me.
Complete
So,
surprise.
Can you talk a little bit?
Well, I make an outline, and I think I know what everything is like. And I was a screenwriter for a long time, so I make these big boards with these Post-it notes. I think I know what I'm doing. And then when the characters really come to life, they start to take over and they start to make their own choices, and I kind of have to follow them. So I think I know, but and I think that's part of the excitement for me about being a writer. It's the same way I felt about being a reader. I want to turn the page and see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. And the same thing as a writer, I want to see what's going to happen.
So it comes to you, suddenly you're really surprised. Is it at the beginning of the day, the middle of the day? Is there any prediction about when you're going to be surprised?
No, it just happens whenever.
Right. I mean, would you say, okay, and this is a loaded, silly question. So it's like, does it sometimes feel like Alice magic to you when something?
Well, I have to say, books feel like magic to me. Writing feels like magic to me. It feels like channeling in a way sometimes, where the characters just take over and I'm just kind of writing. I've often thought that I feel like I'm playing music when I'm writing, so that it's like a rhythm and it's almost hypnotic. And that for me is the great thing about it.
So, okay. And then you talk a lot about this book, and that is really fascinating because it seems like, and this book is so, it's such a fast read. The texture of the language is amazing. I think especially when you describe a lot of food and flavors and smells and the quality, like it's like what kind of toast, what kind of tea cake, the quality of the light in October. It's so funny because I've had this weird light today only because I think you're here. And so the texture, but it's really brilliantly plotted as well. I mean, it's a page turner in terms of the plot as well. So it's just a great story of like trying to undo this curse because a young man has fallen under the curse again. And so it's kind of like it's chasing all over these countries and places. So it's a terrific read.
They have to go back in time and back to the place where it all began to try to undo what's been done. But, I always feel like when I'm writing, I feel like it's kind of like I'm like also the set designer. I am trying to build the world for the characters to move into and live in. So I need to know all those details, what they're having, what the toast is like, what plants are growing outside the door, what trees are in that area, what kind of birds there are. I have to know what the world is like in order for the characters to really fully be alive.
Yeah. And I think the way that you write it also, there's this theme that's so beautiful that there's magic that you do as a witch, like getting a table to rise. And then there's the magic of the human experience. And I think just the opening of your book, and that's not giving too much away to say where Jet, this character, it's the death beetle. It's kind of like, and I started dreaming about that beetle thing. It's kind of like in my dream, it's like white and crescent, like whatever. So it and where she has it's an amazing opening to a book. She has one last week to live. She accepts it and suddenly sees the ethereal magic of everything around her, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, the
And-
magic of everyday life. I mean, that's really what the magic is. It's the magic of love. It's the magic of sisterhood. It's the magic of the wind in the trees. Just everything she sees during that last 7 weeks is magic to her. And it's kind of the way I wish I could look at the world, especially right now, through those eyes, and to see all that's beautiful. It's such a gift.
Well, that's of course what I was going to ask. I was going to say, Alice Hoffman, when you're in bed with your tea, is it magic? Well, I think whether you feel that, and I don't want to give anything away about the book or the ending, but I do want to say the one thing that I think is, and I'm not going to say where it happens or why, but if a witch loses her magic, then she's no longer a witch, and then she will always float, and so now she gets to die.
Well, that is. I mean, that was, it was kind of a thing. When during the witch trials, you really couldn't win, because if you couldn't float and then you weren't a witch and you died, but you couldn't win. Even if you proved yourself not to be a witch, you would drown. So it just really it was a no-win situation. And what can I say?
But you make it so beautiful, and it's such a beautiful moment. And I think you've said the magic is sister and sister swimming, sister and brother walking through Paris, and I think that is so much the magic of this book. It's just so moving. Well,
I also got to go to all the places that I haven't been able to go to in the past 2 years, so that was really fun. All of my favorite places are in this book.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. The book is an amazing read, and it's sort of for those who love literature and then love a fast moving book, if I may say. It's just the best of all possible worlds, and it's really, and you can start. I think that you've said it's the fourth in this amazing series, but you can, even if you haven't read the other three, you can pick this one up.
Yeah.
Right? You can read
you don't have to read them in order, or you don't have to read one before you read the others. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
So thank you so much. The great Alice Hoffman. It's really terrific to talk to you, and it's a fantastic
so much.
book.
Lovely to talk to you.
Yes, thank you, Alice. Alice Hoffman's newest book, just out, is the Book of Magic, which is all about libraries and writing and witches, and it's such a great read. And it's the fourth and final installment in her amazing Practical Magic series. And if you haven't seen the movie starring Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman and Stockard Channing and Diane Wiest, watch it. It's really fun. So next up, Samantha, can you hop on the line for a moment?
Why, hello. You have summoned me. Here I am.
Yes, here I am. So are we going to go to John Lithgow now?
Yeah, Mr. Lithgow.
Can we take a moment before we go to Mr. Lithgow?
Yeah,
it's kind of like
of course.
What's great about today is we have a little bit of time. We never have time to look in the chat and see all the chat that's flying by. I will be talking, and I think it's really fun. Eric, if you're not on the chat, you should jump on it, because Eric is leading just a great discussion that's literally going by on my screen as I'm thinking about my magic. And he's saying, what are people reading? And PJ Colando is reading Colson Whitehead. Linda Bowen is reading Jean Hound Corlitz's The Plot. Thank you. We had Jean Hound Corlitz on just a little while ago.
That's what I was saying.
Oakland, and now it's time to give a shout out, is reading The Last Gift by Abdul Razak Gurnah. And Rachel Schinderman, Ada Calhoun's Why We Can't Sleep. That's a disturbing one. You read that and you won't be able to sleep ever again. And Anissa Rivera, One Long River of Song by Brian Doyle, loving every word of it. Wendy Levine, My Father the Pornographer, a memoir by Chris Offutt. And there's great choices. Eric is on it. Marilyn Baldwin, I'm always through it. I'm reading Foolie by Laurie R. King. Linda Pack, Magic Lessons. There's chat about some Nobel Prize stuff. Marilyn Baldwin, Folly. Bonnie Ilson, Insole, The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. Really good. Really good. Kathleen Brady, The Word Detective by John Simpson. Brian Brockhouse says, oh, yay. Reading short stories of Catherine Mansfield and Flannery O'Connor. How great is that, Brian?
Always a classic. Always
Right
a
in the
classic.
pocket. He's reading female writers, Judith Colson, favorite writers, Alice Hoffman. So I feel blessed to hear speech. So good. And so, of
Wonderful.
course, there's also an interview before we go to the John Lithgow video moment. We went, you've done a piece on Southern California OC Register and Alice Hoffman. And oh, Jenny Grodberg. Hi. Silence of the Grave, 17th Summer, Ted Chiang, Madeline L'Engle, so many others. So if you are interested, hop in the chat. There's so many. Oh my gosh, it goes on and on. So
That's where the action is, folks. The chat is where
yay,
the
an
action
alien
is.
superstar from last month, the committed by Viet Thanh Nguyen. So many. Okay, so now before we go to John Lithgow, I just want to bracket a little bit if I could. Will you let me? You forbade me from it.
Yes.
Okay. So John
I will. I
Lithgow,
told you not to, but I will. Okay, go ahead.
the great actor that is joining us momentarily. Okay, I just want to say up front, Bookish is not a political show. We're not partisan, but you can't really sugarcoat the fact that John Lithgow who writes satiric verse, is not really a fan of our 45th president. Okay, safe to say.
Not really.
Not really. Okay, so for those of you who are, don't bearage us. We are in equal time show, or you can bearage us in the chat because the chat is so lively today. So feel free. But I just want to mention in terms of equal time, next month we have Martin Dugard on, who's a co-writer with Bill Riley on all those famous the Killing series, Killing Lincoln, Killing Patton, Killing, and he's a Republican who's famously not a fan of our 44th president. But I hope that people on either side of the fence, if you're on the other side, you'll just listen to the writer writing, and they're both charming in their own ways, as you'll see. So if you'll hang on with us, right? Is that okay to say?
Absolutely. It's absolutely the marketplace of ideas here. This is what we're all about. Everybody should be heard and explore ideas together. That's how community happens. So
yes.
Anyway, I'll get off. Go to it, my girl.
Okay, let's. John Lithgow, you are one of the most celebrated actors of our time. 6 Emmys, 2 Tonys, 2 Golden Globes, 2 Oscar nods, the credits, The World According to Garp, Terms of Endearment, Third Rock from the Sun, Dexter, The Crown. But now zillions of people are getting to know you as this brilliant verse writer. So how did this verse writing thing start?
I'm barely getting to know myself as a verse writer. It's all so new. It all started when I did a novelty performance at a public theater gala where I performed a Gilbert and Sullivan opera aria. I am the very model of a modern major general in the person of Michael T. Flynn. And I rewrote the lyrics and I absolutely killed with political commentary right in the middle of 2017, which was the year he had his great downfall. That inspired, actually, my literary agent heard this little novelty song of mine, and it was his bright idea. He said, "You've got to write political satire." And I was very hesitant. I've never been front foot politically. I have strong political feelings, but I've always been ambivalent about parlaying celebrity into a public forum. But but Trump has changed everything. Between Trump and my literary agent, I ventured into this crazy project, and it came very easily, mainly because the subject matter is so extravagantly bizarre. It's so easy to satirize. Most of the subjects are not Trump himself. They are the crazy people whom he gathered around himself and then fired or forced out of office and basically tainted for the rest of their lives. To me, it's both very comical, ripe for satire, and kind of poignant. Curiously, I regard these as rather empathetic poems.
And we'll get to that in a moment because it's so interesting. And I think that your writing, though, people say, "Oh, he's a huge celebrity. He had some time off. He wrote some poems." That is not at all true. The wordplay is absolutely ingenious and quite mind-blowing. It calls to mind A.A. Milne or Lewis Carroll, also Jonathan Swift, 18th century British satirist. And I think that what I want to ask you about and fans of Trump can wait because we're going to address them in a moment, but it's bookish. We're going to talk about craft. Your images are so ingenious and fresh. I think that in your new book, which is Portraits of American Scoundrels in Verse, you know, you talk about Nathan Bedford Forrest, Civil War era figure. And I just have to read this a lot. You'd read it better, but I pulled it up. When the Ku Klux Klan anointed him their very first grand wizard, his reputation sank below the belly of a lizard. And I just got that's so fantastic. And in your first poem, you famously rhymed, do it, screw it, sue it, chew it, blew it, pursue it with.
Yes, with Mr. Pruitt, Scott
Pruitt. So they're ingenious. And how do you come up with this? What's your writing process like?
Well, it's excruciatingly painstaking. You know, getting meter right and getting rhymes perfect, they are all perfect. I will not allow a false rhyme. And hitting on interior rhymes within a single line. All of this is a very difficult process. I'm a big fan of impossible crossword puzzles. Just tenacity is my strong suit. I love difficult crosswords because what are crosswords for if not for wasting time? So I've approached these poems in exactly that way. They are very, very frustrating, but you're elated when you get to the last rhyme of the last line of the last sentence of a poem. You're just elated. It's completely wonderful. You think you're a genius, and then you have to go back and start all over again.
And the reader is elated also, but you also illustrate these things.
Yes,
and again,
yes.
I'm going to put up something to the camera. I'm so old school. Like, here's this thing of General Custer.
Yeah,
and this
exactly.
image is so fantastic. The illustration, it actually put me on the mind of Hogarth. You have another book in my messy house.
Oh,
it's kind of like, if you look at
Sandra, you're naming all of my heroes.
But just look, if you look at, I'm behind, this is like the worst technology. Like, but if you see how the movement of these images go, it's quite ingenious. And you also have, when you draw, Rudy Giuliani, it's fair to say, is a favorite character of yours. Yes. And here's like your drawing of his.
Yeah.
Here's the reveal. That's Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, that's right.
And then here's you recently on the Stephen Colbert report. So I want to ask you, given that you draw these caricatures and also do these amazing portrayals, is there any creative connection between the artist and the actor?
Oh, I think so. You know, I love extravagant expression. I love physicalizing these people, but it's the same thing I do when I act. You know, I go overboard for comic effect, but I try to express everything physically as well as orally and verbally when I act. It really is part of the same process. The poems and the illustrations definitely go together. Neither is nearly as good without the other. You know, the drawings have punchlines just the way each stanza has a punchline. You know, the basic idea. Custer is backwards on his horse.
Yes, and I think of the guy, the doctor with the goat glands, and his goat is the best character. And then the goat sort of has the last laugh in the cemetery.
Exactly.
That's how I thought they were kind of Hogarth-like, because the stories, the pictures tell the story.
The pictures tell the story. They not only tell a story, they tell a joke. And their placement in between the stanzas. I worked very closely with my book designer, Pam Geismar, to make sure that the drawings go off like firecrackers, just the way the rhymes do.
Yes, they absolutely do. And I should say, we're going to have you read a poem for our group. And I think I also, you've always said that you have played both like scoundrels and fools, you know, and which is a lot of work for, as you say, bald white men over 40. I mean, played Winston Churchill in The Crown and Roger Ailes in Bombshell. So I think, and the portraiture of Roger Ailes is so amazing. I think it goes back to what you said about there is a humanity underneath that you always.
Yeah, I mean, those are two very interesting characters that I played in quick succession, two fat, short, old, bald men. It made me wonder where in the world I was heading in my career. But both of them are characters of many, many dimensions and qualities. One, of course, was a great hero, and one was a despicable scoundrel, at least in your immediate response to them. What was fascinating was finding Churchill's failings and finding Roger Ailes' flickers of redemption. To me, those are the wonderful challenges of acting. I'm in the empathy business, and I look for things to empathize with in just about everybody, whether I'm playing them or writing about them.
So on that note, as if we could find empathy, can you read us a poem?
Yeah, the poem about a very, very sad case, Bernie Madoff. And I will show you, I'll show you the drawing at the end. It's one of my favorites because it's, as I say, it serves as another punchline. It's called Madoff's Trade-Off. What Calvin Trillin informed me is called a monorhyme. 2008, that fateful year when half of us were laid off, a massive Ponzi scheme collapsed the work of Bernie Madoff. For decades, he had bilked his fund and gleefully sashayed off, but then the FBI showed up and collared Bernie Madoff. The slackers at the SEC had scrupulously stayed off, since most of them had always been in bed with Bernie Madoff. Riches from his faithful flock were callously conveyed off to sate the greed and appetite of hungry Bernie Madoff. Celebrities and charities thought every wager paid off. Affinity fraud was put to use by pious Bernie Madoff. Each investor's fiscal skin was mercilessly flayed off. The biggest scam in history fattened Bernie Madoff. His youthful sense of right and wrong with age had slowly strayed off. The poster boy of theft is now amoral Bernie Madoff. A widow shamed and two dead sons present a gloomy trade-off. A legacy of disrepute has followed Bernie Madoff. At length, a dreary dirge is heard as people watch him played off. They stare with sullen, vacant eyes, but hardly any of them cries. Few will mourn a life of lies like that of Bernie Madoff. Actually, that's kind of tender at the end, but here's my merciless satirical drawing of him. Remember, he bankrupted everybody. So he's being fitted for, he's a naked fat man being fitted for a barrel, as all of his investors have been.
And, you know, I love so much about that, everything about that. And I think the image of the barrel is really perfect for this book because people should remember it's called A Confederacy of Trumpties, you know, American scoundrels in history. And that you go back, not just, as I said, to General Custer, Teapot Dome, Typhoid Mary, and then, you know, and I think the historical like aspect is so it's so delicious and so fun to read.
Yes, and for me, what is especially delicious is the fact that there are 6 or 7 of these people, whom no one will have heard of. They are forgotten. John Romulus Brinkley, Sarah Howe, Theodore Bilbo, Benjamin Ryan Tillman. It's an extraordinary lesson. History, it's part of the human condition, I think, that our impulse to cover over bad actors and bad events in history. You know, they are the ones who are forgotten. The so-called heroes are elevated. Sometimes heroes are elevated who themselves are scoundrels and their scoundrel past is buried. You know, it's I don't know, I think it's a truism, and it's just, the book reads like a history. It goes chronologically and arrives at the present day. And all of these people just have such extraordinary parallels and reference points to what's been happening in the last 4 years. So it's a good sequel to the first 2 books.
It's fantastic, and it's fun, and it's funny, and it's so clever, and it's amazing, and everyone should get it. Democrat, Republican, Independent, goats. What? So thank you so much, the legendary John Lithgow. His new book, just out, is A Confederacy of Trumpties, Portraits of American Scoundrels in Verse. Thank you, sir.
Okay, and I'm afraid I have to correct you, Sandra. It's A Confederacy of Dumpties.
Oh, what did I just say? I said
A Confederacy of Trumpties, but that's allowed. I say it all the time.
Okay.
I'd like
Thank you.
everybody to hear me thank the legendary Sandra Zinglo. Really wonderful interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And we're really happy we caught you. And we'll look for you on the airwaves as your media onslaught continues. Really delightful.
Great.
And here we are in this magical day. Do you see the different angle? I'm on a different computer because my other one crashed. But the good news is that we have Mary Roach here, and this is so exciting. So let me give the Mary Roach, for those who don't know, the 30-second download. In case you don't know, Mary Roach is the author of the New York Times bestsellers. Remember those one-word titles like Swerve of Our Show, Stiff, Spook, Bonk, Gulp, Grunt, and Hacking for Mars. She's written for National Geographic, Wired, and the New York Times Magazine, amongst others, and her legendary TED Talk that I mentioned at the top of the show made the 10-20 most watched list. She's been a guest editor for Best American Science and Nature Writing, a finalist for the Royal Society's Winton Prize, and a winner of the American Engineering Society's Journalism Award in a category for which, let's be honest, she says she was a sole entrant. Her new book, Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law, is just out. And I'm going to say, while O Magazine has called her one of our most consistently entertaining science journalists, and the Washington Post has named her America's funniest science writer, Mary describes herself humbly as, and I quote, a vertebrate pest. Welcome, Mary. Hello. Yeah.
Hey.
Oh
Okay.
my gosh, it's so great to see you. Okay, so let us do just a quick whirlwind tour before we get to Fuzz. Although you reportedly, and you can see how I'm reading Wikipedia, so never lie. So reportedly, you began your writing career with the San Francisco Zoological Society, writing press releases on things like wart surgery on elephants. That's from Wikipedia. Yes. Never lies. And now you call yourself like the gateway drug to science because you're actually fun to read, and then people, move on to science. But but you didn't start out as a science writer, right? So for those
correct
to your career and journey, can you say how you got into this crazy?
Oh, Sandra, it's kind of pathetic. I graduated in the midst of a recession. I had no job skills, and I just thought, well, I can put a sentence together because you have to do that in college. So I thought, well, maybe copy editing, and I was terrible copy editing. I was the kind of person who'll go like, I think this was capitalized different in chapter 2 than it is in chapter 14, but who cares? Nobody's going to notice. But you absolutely can't think that way if you're going to be a copy editor. So, and then eventually, because I'm looking at all these manuscripts, and I thought, well, it'd be kind of more fun to write this shit rather than clean it up. So I started below the bottom. I started actually, do you know when like a newspaper has an advertising supplement that's got fake articles that are supposed to look like real content? I would write that stuff.
Well, it's funny that you talk about copy editing, because we're going to go back, because now your new genre is so suited for you when you can use words like stotting and pronking and frass and kerf.
I do love words. Yes, I love the highly, highly specific verb and noun. I love it. And that's every book affords me a new opportunity to step into these weird little worlds and gather these wonderful words like pronk and frass and kerf.
Can you, kerf, for those Scrabble players, John was a crossword puzzle doer. Can you spell kerf and say what it means?
Kerf. So that's a good, the K is 5. F is, what is F, 4? Anyway,
Yeah.
you throw that on a triple word, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
So especially if you could get the, oh no, it's too short to get the double and the triple. But anyway, kerf is good. Kerf is the width of the cut of a saw blade.
Right.
So if you took a saw, like a saw, and you slice into wood, the width of that cut, that's your kerf.
That's
Your kerf, Sandra.
Okay, said by a very bad copy editor, but a brilliant writer, Mary. Thank you. Okay, so you've described your work thus far, see, because I study you, as kind of things that are, you write about human things that are anatomical and vaguely gross, or the human body in unusual circumstances. So
Yes.
we have, just as a quick recap, Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers, because it's covers signs of death. Then we had Spook, the soul, Bunk, Sex, Gulp, Eating, Grunt, Humans in War, Packing for Mars, Humans in Space. But now in Fuzz, When Nature Breaks a Law, we have Marauding Animals and Trees. It's a new frontier.
Yeah.
What sparked your interest in moving now into this world?
Well, the human body only has so many parts, and not all of them are particularly Mary Roachable. You know, I'm not going to do the brain. We have Oliver we had Oliver Sacks. We have David Eagleman. We have these amazing neuroscientists, and the brain is theirs. You know, that's their turf. I don't have the background for that, and I don't. I'm probably not the heart. It's not very me. So I thought, okay, I've kind of used up the body for the moment, and I need to go elsewhere. So I spent a long time kind of floundering around. You know, people ask me, oh, what was the inspiration for this book? And I'm like, I don't think inspiration is the right word. It's more like a process of stumbling around, crashing into walls, and then finally just sitting down on something and going, okay, I think that will work. So I get excited when I stumble onto a new pocket of science that I didn't know existed. In this case, human wildlife conflict. But I came to it in a very roundabout way. I don't know if you want to hear my very messy origin story, but I stumbled. This is one of the things I stumbled onto. It eventually turned into a wall that I hit. But this woman who works up in the National Wildlife Forensics Laboratory up in Ashland, Oregon, and she has this hair library of all the different kinds of hairs. This is for forensics work. Like if an endangered animal species or piece of it, a fur or a body part is brought into the country, it's up to her to kind of figure out, using just a hair, to figure out like what species this is, which kind of fascinated me. I think part of it was just I was attracted to the term hair library. Like you could go in with your borrowing card and go, yeah, I'd like to check out some hair, but it's not like that. Anyway, so and they were she also has written this guide, an 8-page guide to how to determine how to tell real from counterfeit tiger penis, which is something that gets sometimes used in traditional medicine for a kind of a virility booster. And tigers, of course, are endangered, so that's illegal. We don't need to, I could fill the whole next 10 minutes with how to tell fake versus real tiger penis and that whole story, but that's a side trip. But anyway, I thought this is kind of cool. And what book would I build around this? This is kind of how I do my books. I find 2 sort of nuggets, and then I think, oh, well, what would be the book that would go around these? I never start with a topic like I'd like to write about the alimentary canal. No, that's not how, or Packing for Mars. It's not like I had a real fascination for space. It was 2 very specific things that I came across that made me think I'd really like to write about this. So the problem was that I could not tag along on any investigation with any investigators, because that's illegal. If it's an open case, you can't just have a journalist traipsing along. So, and that wrecked it for me, because I like to go places, and I always, for most chapters, unless they're historical, I'm going there and reporting and being on the scene and being, as you mentioned, the vertebrate pest. Can I come with you?
So there's so much in this book, and the good thing is people just have to get it and have to read it. And the way you look at these wildlife management stories sort of in the Western world and in the East. And I think
Yeah.
that people will have to go and like Bears and Aspen has such a, it's such an astonishing tale about how we kind of deal with bears there.
Right.
But then you also go to India. So maybe if you can talk a little bit about, in a nutshell, the main difference between how we
Yeah.
deal with wildlife in the West and
Sure.
how they're dealt with in India.
Well, yeah, the species that I focused on, two of them, macaques, which are monkeys, and elephants, they feature in Hinduism. You have Ganesh and Hanuman. So these are creatures. So people are brought up, if they're Hindu, they're brought up with this kind of reverence and affection for these animals. So when those animals kind of get into trouble, break the law, as it were, there isn't the same approach here in the United States and in Canada. If a bear or a mountain lion harms a person, that animal is destroyed. It's considered a public safety threat. It's caught, it's destroyed, and it's very unfortunate because we kind of attract them into our environments, sometimes intentionally, but usually unwittingly. But in India, that isn't the response. What is done is the family is compensated. The government will compensate a family, or if it's on private, like a tea estate, private property, the estate is supposed to compensate the worker whose structure was damaged or whatever. So and if you talk to people there, they don't want the animal destroyed. I spoke to this lovely woman who worked on a tea estate up in the north of India, and her shop had been, the walls had been sort of pushed over by elephants twice because they wanted to come in. She sells grain, she sells produce to the in the workers' village, and so I said, "Do you ever want these animals destroyed? I mean, this keeps happening." And she said, "Why would you kill a god?" She said, "No, we just say namaste and please go away." And her anger, she was angry, but her anger was for the managers of the tea estate who have not compensated her, who should have compensated her. So there's it's just a different a different approach. It's very interesting. I mean, it's not true everywhere and with every species. I spent time there's a region in the middle Himalaya where leopards stalk people as prey, which is very unusual for, the big cats here, the mountain lions. It's so rare that ever happens. I mean, here in California, we have about 5,000 mountain lions, but a decade will go by and nobody's killed by a mountain lion. And it's far more common though in this region in India. And those people, because often it's children that are taken and they are pissed, and sometimes they take matters into their own hands. So I don't mean to say that no one ever kills an animal in India, but particularly with the monkeys, you see at these temples, the Hanuman temples in India, always there are lots of macaques outside, and people are making offerings, as it were, to the sort of living representation of Hanuman. But at the same time, they're really annoyed and they're complaining to the government. You should fix this. You need to do something about this. Make this problem go away. But they won't stop feeding them, so they are both creating the problem and wanting it to disappear. Yeah, it's a fascinating conundrum. They're trying to come up with birth control methods for these monkeys, and that's a tough thing. Oral contraceptive, obviously this is a free-ranging population. How do you monitor who's eating what and how much? How do you make sure other species don't come in and eat this bait, the contraceptive bait? So they try to do it with a vaccine, an immunocontraceptive vaccine, but that's tough because, as with many vaccines, you need a booster. How do you know which monkey had the first one and is going to get the second one? You have to round them up, and the second time it just doesn't work. It does work on some isolated populations here, like wild horses on an island, Assateague Island. They do it there. Anyway, it's an interesting challenge.
Well, and I think that the book is, I mean, people should know because they should buy it immediately. It's really hilarious in your usual way. Just the section on poop, when you said the future of turd science is bright, is hilarious. Or that in the Vatican, nuns have bad habits, like vaping, hilarious. And also really moving, I think by the end, when we think about the rodents in our house in California, that, you know what, I will never use a glue trap again.
Thank you. Good. Yeah.
So, and
Good.
anyway,
Me neither.
the time is too short, Mary Roach. Thank you so much for hopping on to our show. Mary Roach's new book, Fuzz, Get It, When Nature Breaks the Law. And thank you so much for coming on.
Oh,
Hopefully you'll
sure.
come again, we can talk longer.
Thank you so much. Thank
Okay.
you, Sandra. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, everybody. Wow, what a night. Never anything like semi-live Zoom to make things thrilling. Bookish will be back November 19th with literary icon Mary Gateskill, Anthony Bourdain's longtime producer Tom Vitale, blockbuster bestseller Martin Dugard, and finally, we're going to get the Twisted Sister himself back, JJ French. So please stay tuned for that. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye.